This is Radiant Voices Media.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode. Today's guest is someone who's been in the women's health and fitness space long before it became a trending hashtag. Kat is a seasoned coach who's not only transformed lives but has witnessed the evolution and sometimes the chaos of the fitness industry from inside out. In today's episode, we dive into her personal journey from being active at a young age to building a long term career in a space that often glorifies aesthetics over health. We get honest about what the industry doesn't always talk about, such as body image, pressure, influencer culture, quick fixes, and what it really means to empower women through fitness. Whether you're deep into your fitness journey or just getting started, this conversation will challenge your perspective and remind you why strength, physical, and mental power matters the most. This is your permission slip to speak your truth, own your story, and laugh through the chaos. Welcome to the Transparently Jordan podcast. Thanks again for coming on. Maybe, Kat, if you don't mind getting started we already talked about this just now, but just giving the listeners a little insight on who you are, and we can kind of branch out from there.
Yeah, absolutely. So I work in the fitness industry. I'm a qualified nutritionist and strength coach. I've been in the industry going on 9 years now. And I guess my journey has sort of evolved as I have. I very much got into the industry when it was, BBG, Kayla Sinners, like that sort of
Right.
space in the fitness industry where it was very much, small and with abs.
Mm.
And I guess over the years, we've seen the industry change. We've seen it move away from that. We've seen it come back to that. And I've just sort of been navigating my own way in that space since.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, I think it's interesting talking to people like you who have been in it for so long because things like you were saying have changed for I've been in it for about 10 years as well,
Yeah.
and things like back then are so different, including activities out there with CrossFit and High Rocks and bodybuilding, and there's just so much new things out there and things are always changing. So that's kind of why I wanted to have you on. But maybe let's get started. Just giving the listeners a little insight of something about the fitness industry that they wouldn't know, maybe. So,
Ooh.
because I think again, things are changing all the time, but and we think of the fitness industry in a certain way, but what's kind of a misconception out there about the whole industry or about maybe anything within the industry, really?
Ooh. I feel like this will probably be a bit of a spicy one. I think there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes that people aren't aware of. And I think we are sort of seeing, obviously with social media, we're sort of seeing people are editing photos or using filters and things like that. I think especially in a female space, we're not sort of as aware of, say, influencers using anabolics, things like that. And especially with females, sometimes it's not quite as obvious. And the amount of times I've had clients come to me and be like, oh my God, look at this person's physique. It's incredible. And I'm like, okay, but realize the photo is edited. She's got a BBL. She's on anabolics. There's so many different sort of factors influencing that. And I think, some people are quite transparent about it. And I think that's fantastic. I understand when people aren't transparent about it in terms of it's not legal. So they're covering their own asses. But at the same time, I think, especially for coaches, when they're putting forward, I like this, I train like this, and this is why I look like this. And people are like, oh, look what she did in a year. They're not necessarily getting the whole picture of what's been behind that.
Yeah, I think plenty within what you just said, the whole Instagram or social media editing thing is one thing, right?
Yeah.
I think it's something that we can't get away from. We can't get away from social media right now unless you delete your accounts and everything, which I think a lot of people are starting to do these days. It's becoming more common, but I think Instagram, TikTok, social media in general is such a big part of our life.
Yeah.
And it's hard for people, I can understand, it's hard for people to to try and differentiate or see like, okay, is this edited? How is this edited? Like, because it looks so natural these
Yeah.
days in that regard. And then as per, I guess, the enhancement side of things, like there have been people on this podcast that have been quite open about
Yeah.
the enhancements, which I love. But like, how do you think people like you and me, I think it's a lot easier to tell sometimes, who might be enhanced and who
Yeah.
might not be. Some people might just have good genetics, and I think
Yeah.
even that we know a bit more of the difference. But if somebody is just starting to get into the gym and comes to see someone like you or a coach and is like, oh, this is what I aspire to be, and we kind of look at the picture and are like, oh well, that's an enhanced person,
Yeah.
like how do people what are some tips that you can give to people out there to try and like weed out, the enhancements and stuff like that when they're looking online?
I think one, keep in mind the time frame. Like, yes, you can achieve a lot in a year. Um, but realistically, if someone has gone from never training and then within the year they've, tripled the size of their quads and, they're looking real jacked. Um, there's building muscle takes time. Even as a newbie, when you are, making the most of newbie gains and all that, like it does take time. I think it falls back on that, if it looks too good to be true, chances are there's something more to it. And you even look at, if you look at, say, natty bodybuilders, for example, and you look at what they can achieve in a year where they are, everything is focused towards that build and then that cut. So they are eating to the T how they should be. They're training consistently. They're doing everything to put on muscle. And like, obviously you've got things like genetics playing into that. But if you compare that to some things we see where it's like, okay, well, the difference is day and night. So I think it's just being a bit more aware, like, social media very much does push that quick fix and look how quickly that person change their physique and things like that. And obviously getting leaner does allow for more muscle to be visible. But if it is such a dramatic transformation in a very short amount of time, that normally sort of gives you a bit of a tip that it may not be 100% a natty sort of transformation.
And I think it's like the whole quick fix thing that you just mentioned, like that's such a common thing these days. Like I think we live in a world where everybody thinks that they're so busy that they need something now, and they can't wait for something, or they can't put in the work, and they need it like now, like they need it quickly. Because like you were saying, like if somebody achieves something in a year, not to say that they can't, but like I think it's different. Like if they're starting from scratch and they're starting from an average or below average physique, and then they obtain this like above average, then that's a bit more easy to tell. But like I think like if somebody has been working for 5-10 years, like it's so hard to build muscle. Like you were saying, it's so hard to achieve. And a lot of these people that are competing have worked years and years and years. How do you kind of educate people about the whole quick fix kind of thing? Because like it's such a common thing. Like people want something now, really. So what's your opinion on the whole quick fix in that whole area of space?
So I feel like my opinion on it has, I guess, evolved over the years. I used to be very like, quick fixes are stupid. Like it's a money grab from coaches. It's, it's bad. There's no healthy way to do a quick fix and all of that. I still stand by that. However, I think it can be a useful tool when people are wanting to get in and do, like in terms of like your challenges and things like that. It can be a useful tool in terms of while people have that high level of motivation, getting them into training, getting them to overcome that sort of anxiety in the gym and things like that, where they've got that additional support. But where a lot of these challenges and things fall short is, say, your 6 weeks, your 8 weeks, your 12 weeks, whatever, comes to an end, and that's it. There's no support for them coming out of that. There's no support to help them sustain those habits and to make that into a lifestyle. So that's where it shouldn't just be a quick fix challenge. The challenge should be sort of, I guess, that gateway into getting into that lifelong change.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, I think. Like I think there's probably lots of ways to look at it and to, I guess, educate people
Yeah.
on it, really. Um, what is your opinion, I guess, on diets and that kind of stuff? Because I think those, like, if we stay along the line of quick fixes and everything, like, have you experienced anything personally with diets? Have you tried it versus like your clients and everything? Like, what's your experience with diets? And because it's a common thing. I
Yep.
think a lot of people like to try diets. A lot
Yep.
of people might ask us about diets. What do you do with diets when it comes to that?
So when it comes to working, like, I guess the nutrition side of things with clients, it's very, very individual. Every, something that works for one person isn't necessarily going to work for another. I've got clients who thrive on, being able to track calories and macros and all of that. And I think, again, that works as a tool. To me, all of these things are tools in a toolbox. And it's like, you know, someone using a screwdriver to try hit a nail, it's not going to get the job done. So it's sort of equipping people with the right tool for the job. Um, I think it was interesting having recently done a bodybuilding prep where, we are sitting in a calorie deficit for a longer period of time. It was quite beneficial for my clients to see because they start to see when you get into that deeper end of a prep. And it's not so fun, so they're like, oh my God, you're looking so lean. I'm like, yeah, but every single thing I eat is tracked to the gram. So I think it's sort of put into perspective the work necessary on the sort of diet side of things to achieve such an extreme goal. And so clients were like, oh, but I also like having,
Yeah.
a life.
Yeah, exactly.
So for a lot of clients, it is sort of, I guess, an education around macros and micros and why that's important. I tend to do it from an overall health perspective, not just, we all hear all the time calorie deficit, calorie surplus, especially working with women where it is a bit more complex when it comes to hormones and all of that. It's also, okay, we include protein because X, Y, Z. Okay, we want a minimum amount of fats in terms of we want at least, 75 grams, potentially more depending on the client to maintain, hormone health and things like that. So I guess in terms of like dieting as such, it's more fitting what the client needs rather than being like this specific diet. And taking it more from like a health perspective.
Right. Yeah. No, that's very fair. And like, I guess your experience with the whole bodybuilding side of things and competition, like that's a common theme that's come up many times.
Yep.
When it comes to like, it gets to a certain point and people just, it sucks really. Like you're
Yeah.
eating so little, your energy's low, and
Yeah.
and that makes sense. What are some things like people out there that are aspiring for a competition one day,
Yep.
or are looking to achieve, maybe it's a practice prep or something.
Yep.
What are some things that people don't know or wouldn't know about like preparing for a show, the whole experience doing a show and after the show?
Yep.
Because again, like I think these things are good to talk about
Yep.
because it's good to see the pictures, up
Oh,
on
it's very
stage and everything.
glamorized.
Exactly. But like people put in a lot of work and
Yeah.
it can suck, I think, a lot of times as well.
Yeah.
So what are some misconceptions or some things that people wouldn't know?
I think a lot of people don't realize, like, I was quite lucky in terms of the negative side effects of dieting. I didn't get hit with too many of them. My coach is very good at being on top of it and tracking, he's set red flags in dieting and he checks in with us constantly. I was very lucky that I didn't experience a lot of those. But obviously with women, you can lose your menstrual cycle and obviously that can impact sort of longer term fertility. Your sleep for a lot of people go out the window, especially towards the tail end of prep. I was waking up around 11 o'clock at night on the dot, around 2 o'clock on the dot.
Oh, that's interesting.
You're peeing all the time,
Right. Yeah.
which is
Uh-huh.
really annoying.
Yeah.
Um, it gets quite uncomfortable in your own body when you're that lean. You go to sit and the bones in your hips and butt are sort of uncomfortable. Sleeping on your side is uncomfortable if your knees are touching. Like it's just, it gets very glamorized. But in the lead up, like you don't feel great.
Yeah.
You don't look great. The only time you're like, yes, is like you're in the gym, you're seeing striations and all of that, and that's really cool. And then in day-to-day life, you're like, I look like a corpse.
Right. Yeah.
Um,
What does that do mentally for someone? Because like, and for you, because I think like it's like you were saying, like it's good and it's glamorized, and
yeah,
you're on stage, you see all these pictures, you're flicking
yeah,
through, your Instagram and everything, but like mentally, what does that do? Because I think it I don't want to answer the question, but like in my head, like that builds some good resilience. I
yeah,
can understand
100%.
that. But like, what are some other things mentally that that does to someone, and for someone like you, let's
Yeah.
say, what your experience?
I mean, I think it, like you said, it varies from person to person.
Yeah.
I quite enjoyed the
Yeah.
experience overall. I
Okay.
enjoyed seeing what I was capable of. I enjoyed the resilience that it built. I know a lot of people do tend to struggle on the other side of it. So the reverse out, where you're now actively putting on weight and body fat because stage lean isn't, it's not healthy.
Yeah.
And people see you on stage, like you said, but you're pumped up, you're tanned,
Yeah.
you've typically carved up, so you're looking a lot fuller and things like that. But it's such a small window, and then you're putting that weight back on. Um, I was quite lucky in terms of, I guess, mentally navigating through it. Like, I had my occasional moment where I was just like, oh, I miss being like super shreddy. Um, but I mean, at my heaviest, I've been almost 100 kilos. At my lightest, I've been down to just shy of 65. So I've sort of been the whole spectrum of things. So, putting on a few kilos post comps, like, I was just like, well, it's necessary. My health is important. My strength has gone up. My sleep is better. Like, the lifestyle that you live in prep, it's like the tail end of it is not something that's sustainable. Like, you don't want to be walking around with zero energy. You It doesn't feel good when your training feels like shit. And when you're that depleted, it feels like shit. Um, so yeah, I think for me mentally, the shift back into sort of, I guess, real life, um, hasn't been too brutal. I know a lot of people who have struggled with it. And I understand it because, I think especially if, and I think this goes with any sport where you push it to an extreme, when that sport is your whole identity, that's when it tends to be that struggle because, you finish up with a competition and then you're like, but now what? What's my purpose? And I think that's what you start to see people who do, back-to-back seasons, and they're not taking that time to grow between seasons because they're that fixated on staying stage lean.
Yeah. That's a very good point, because I think, like you were saying, that's almost any sport, right?
Yeah.
Like me with running and all the marathons and stuff that I do, like um if you've reached that goal, you've run a race, or like you've hit stage and everything, like I can totally understand being like, oh, now what?
Yeah.
Like reflecting maybe the rest of the day, and then waking up tomorrow and like, oh, I'm back to normal life now. Like,
Yeah.
I don't need to technically put as much work as I have been the last 6, 8, 9 months, or however
Yeah.
long. So like that can be quite difficult, I think, for some people. I think a lot of people might be better, like at handling it,
Yep.
or whatnot. What does it do? Like, what did it do for you when it comes to comparison? Because I think that's an interesting thing when it comes to like, you've hit something, you've hit a goal, and you've hit like, that physique.
Yep.
But then you're also like now probably scrolling and seeing other people going through that experience and
Yep.
everything. Um, do you notice like a comparison, like you comparing yourself or anything in that regards? You being having been in that position at all, or are you pretty all right with all of that side of stuff?
I feel like yes, but the way I compare is now shifted. So initially, we were aiming for an earlier season, and we got to a couple of weeks out, and I said to my coach, I'm like, I'm not where I want to be to step on stage. And it was very much throughout that season, it was anything that could have gone wrong during that prep went wrong.
Okay.
We had a lot happening. I got COVID. My dog needed emergency surgery. My car broke down multiple times where I couldn't get to the gym. I had to move house. I had to move workplace, like
Oh
everything.
gosh.
It was
Okay.
chaotic.
Yeah.
And we just sort of like pushed through. And I got to a point where I was like, we're pushing and my body is slamming on the brakes. Like, I need to listen. I've always said with prep, like, I want to do it in the healthiest way possible. Um, and I think in that space, I was very much like, my body wasn't doing what I wanted it to do, even though we were ticking all the boxes. And I'd be looking at where everyone else was at and being like, oh, they're looking so lean, they're looking so jacked, like, you know. Um, and there was a lot of that, like, I guess, comparing myself negatively to where everyone else was at. We ended up deciding to delay a season. Best decision ever. It was such a different experience. And it's funny now because he has got quite a good community. So a lot of people who are prepping this season under him, like the people from previous seasons, are still all interacting. So we've got quite a good group. So I'm sort of seeing everyone, you know, they're now 9 weeks out. And it's so exciting. But it's sort of now inspiring rather than me looking at others being like, oh my God, they're looking so lean. I'm like, oh my God, I'm so excited for next time I step on stage. Like, we're going to have a solid grow season. And, you know, it's now I'm looking at like the potential rather than sort of going, oh, like this could have come in tighter, or, you know, I could have done with sort of more muscle mass here. I'm now like, oh my God, like this is so exciting.
Yeah. Okay. I guess just a different perspective
Yeah.
changes things, doesn't it? What is the community like in the bodybuilding space? Because I find sports like that, you know, again, I'm the same with marathon running and triathlon. It's an individual sport in the sense that you're racing by yourself, you're on stage by yourself. But you do have the supports of your coach, of
Yeah.
people around you. You know, it's different. It's not like footy or hockey, or you know, where you're out there with the
Yeah.
team. So it is individualized, but it is team based. What's the community like in the space?
I personally love it.
Okay.
I've heard horror stories. I've heard, you know,
Mm,
fantastic
yeah,
experiences. I've personally had a great
yeah.
experience. Um, and I think, you know, you get good and bad in every sport. You
Mm,
get people that, you know, we've had seasons where you've had someone who hasn't placed where they've wanted to and they've torn shreds off the judges and it's everyone else's fault except their own kind of thing. I think you get one like what we call the crash out queen every season. But overall, like I've made some amazing friends. Um, the support within like my coach Jake's team itself is just like second to none. We've had like so many friendships form within that. But even in terms of like broader space, like just so much support. Um, you know, when my car broke down, I had one of the girls who I would be competing against, same class and everything. We had never met in person. She messaged me on Instagram. She's like, "Do you need me to pick you up and take you to the group posing session? Like, I can grab you on my way." Which is so like above and beyond. So yeah, I've personally had fantastic experiences with it. You know,
yeah.
plenty of friendships
Yeah, that's
formed.
what about like because I think too for maybe people out there that's new. Like if I mean I have no interest ever of
Yep.
being in that space, but like let's say I did in the future, like for an outsider looking in, it can look a bit intimidating,
Oh
you
yeah.
know, seeing all of these people with great physiques and, you know, you look at yourself, you compare yourself and whatnot. It can be quite intimidating, I think. Do you find that, like, how do you navigate that intimidation? Like, if you have a client or if you have somebody, what's an advice or a piece of advice you would give somebody who wants to enter the space and they're afraid about it looking so intimidating, basically, the whole scene of bodybuilding?
I think just know why you're doing it. Like if you're doing it for clout, like you will care what everyone else thinks. I think if like you're doing it because you want to see yourself progress, no one who's doing better than you is going to tear shreds off you. Realistically, like everyone who has entered bodybuilding has had a starting point. So they're not going to look at you getting into it and judge you for wanting to build your physique. And if they are, they're probably a terrible person. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, you know, you're going to have the occasional person in anything that will judge someone for doing something. They're not going to be doing better than you. If they're sitting there with time to judge other people, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. How does social media play into the space these days? Because again, I think social media is such a huge like
Yeah.
aspect of our life these days. And you might see people like, influencers or whatnot compete, have hundreds of thousands of
Yeah.
followers. But then, you have somebody on stage who doesn't have that following but is doing just as good. Like, how does social media play in the space of bodybuilding? Do you think like do you think it's helping the space? Is it not? What's your opinion on that?
I think it's a blessing and a curse.
Okay. All
Um,
right.
I mean, it goes back to that comparison thing. It goes back to, no one's posting their worst photos. Everyone's posting, good angles, good lighting, where they're looking jacked with a good pump. So I guess in terms of like, if you're likely to look at that and compare yourself, it can be a negative thing. Um, in terms of, I guess, networking and meeting other people within the space, it can be a fantastic thing. And then you've also got, I guess, the whole, influencer does one bodybuilding comp place as well, and then suddenly they're doing online coaching when they've got no experience coaching or doing that. That can be a negative thing. So I think it's one of those things, and I think that's social media overall, where there are some very good things to come from it. There are some not so great things to come from it, and there's also some potentially dangerous things to come from it.
Yeah, I think you mentioned an interesting thing there. Like, how do people out there find a coach or an effective coach or like a coach for them really? Because I think if you are, let's say, scrolling through social media, you see somebody with 400,000 followers or something, and
Yeah.
they're now starting to coach. I don't think that necessarily means that they're a good coach,
No,
even
it
though that
means they're
they've
good at
been
marketing.
exactly, even if they've been on stage or everything,
Yeah.
right? So, like, how do people navigate everything and find a coach? How did you find your coach? How do you, what are tips for people out there who are trying to get started and want a coach?
Yeah. I think one thing is, don't be scared to ask questions. Not just asking other people, because obviously, like, if you're looking into it, you'll sort of see other athletes posting about their coaches. Ask them what their experiences were like. Even now I've got people that I've competed on stage with, and they're reaching out, being like, "You seem to have a really good experience. Like, what's your coach like?" And I'm like, "He's the best ever." So ask other people. Also, don't be scared to ask questions of a potential coach. Ask them what their coaching style is like. Ask them how hands-on they are with support. Are they going to be there backstage on show day? Because some coaches aren't. Um, you know, are they in the same state as you? Because that's going to make it a lot easier for them to be backstage. And you're not having, especially for your first show, you're not having to navigate that alone. I was very lucky with my coach in that I was working in the same space as him when I started being like, do I want to compete? So I got to see him take a lot of clients through that process and watch how he coached them and how he overcame, breakdowns and everything else that happens along prep. And also see how he reversed his clients out post comp. I think the main thing is just sort of ask around. There are coaches that have been in the industry for a long time. It's not all about who's got the most followers. It's not who's got the most impressive physique on Instagram. Like, yes, you do want a coach that would potentially practice what they preach. My coach has competed previously and done very well. He's a ICN pro. However, also realize that just because they are currently competing does not mean they are necessarily going to be a good coach.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think those are some very important tips. What about like the online space? Do you recommend having somebody in the same state as you? Are you okay with having a coach that lives, let's say, in Melbourne or something? Like, what about that when it comes to a bodybuilding coach? Do you need somebody there?
I don't think you necessarily need someone there. I think if it's your first comp, it is nice having your coach backstage. Because it can be quite, a hectic, overwhelming experience, especially if you haven't done it before. Um, Obviously with online, like, check-ins and things like that, online, very, very easy. Um, but it's just nice having your coach there on the day. It's not impossible to do it without the coach there. A lot of people will still have their coach set protocols and sort of, send through a spreadsheet of this is what you do on the day. They might still video call them and check in. So I guess it really depends what you are wanting from your coach. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing to have a coach from interstate. I work with coaches that are in sort of Adelaide and they'll fly over for their clients' comps. It's just down to, I guess, what you want personally.
Yeah. Okay. I've actually, interesting enough, never asked anybody this before, who's competed,
Yep.
but what is it like backstage and what is it like before you go on stage? Like, what are the nerves like? What's the whole vibe like back there? What is it like right before you're getting on stage?
So I had a lot of fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was competing with like a great group.
Yeah. That's good.
Um, I had one of my best friends backstage with me, and he was just amazing.
Yeah.
I like to say he's like the perfect balance of knowing when to hype me up and then
Yeah.
being the calm to my
Okay.
chaos. So that was great, and we did have a team, all competing. So it was just like hanging out with your mates, sort of backstage. I think what people don't expect, it's very cramped. There's lots of people. They've got their coaches there. It stinks because everyone has got like coats of, coats upon coats of spray tan. You're not able to put on deodorant when you're getting tan. Like everyone looks glamorous, but we're all like these sticky, sweaty gremlins. Like, but the vibe's good fun. And again, I think it's different people will have different experiences. Um, but yeah, I had a ball back there. I remember before walking out for theme wear, we're sort of all lined up, ready to walk out, and they had tunes playing and stuff, and we're all just like dancing
Yeah.
backstage together and stuff. So it was good fun.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's good. Like, because
Yeah.
I think like sometimes the nerves can get in the way, and like then people might report back that it was the opposite. It was a bad experience. But I
Yeah.
think it's good, like if you can just really let loose and just go with the flow.
Yeah,
Really.
and I think I like with that I was probably lucky. Like one of the girls from my team, she's competed before, so it's not new for her. One of the other girls who was also doing theme wear, she's done a lot of performing. So she's used to being in front of a crowd. I've been on stage before performing. So again, like for me, by the time I'm at that point, whether it's a pole comp, whether it's powerlifting, whether it's bodybuilding, the way I view it is I've done all the hard work. So at this point, you just go out there and have fun. Like you can't change anything at that point. So just enjoy the experience. So for me, it wasn't too much of navigating nerves. Whereas I guess for someone who maybe hasn't been on stage before in any sort of context, then the nerves probably are a lot higher and they could have had a very different experience.
Yeah, it's probably it's like the first time for everything, right? You're
Yeah.
going to be nervous, I think. I think for people listening out there right now, like, listening to all of this, they're listening to your experience right now, and I think it's going to be interesting to maybe hear about like before, the last 9, 10 years when you
Yeah.
started all of this.
Yeah.
What was it like for you in the fitness space, in the activity space? Because I think like it sounds like you were active all of your life. You know what I
No.
mean? But I think in like a lot of cases, like myself, I guess technically I was, but I wasn't.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I think some people just find the fitness space throughout their life. So
Yeah.
what was it like for you when you were younger before this all started?
Yeah. So I was the very quiet, nerdy girl that would do anything to get out of PE
Okay.
and would always get picked last in sports.
Yeah.
So uncoordinated. Like
Mm.
I remember trying out for the footy team in, I reckon, primary school. And we had to like run with the ball and kick it. And I ran and I dropped the ball and went to kick it and just completely missed the ball. And I was
Right.
like, oh my God, like
Yeah.
everyone just saw that. I
Yeah.
was like, that was it.
Mm.
So yeah, not really ever a very sporty kid growing up. I think the first experience where I actually was like, oh, I actually enjoy this would have been late in high school when we had one of the teachers was a taekwondo instructor. So started offering taekwondo. And I dipped my toes in that. Absolutely loved that. And I was like, oh, maybe I can do I can do sports. So I sort of did that for a little period of time. And then sort of that stopped being hosted at the school. So we just sort of stopped doing it. And then dabbled in pole for a little bit. And then I went through a breakup in my 20s, early 20s, and was just like, I need something to distract myself. So I joined a gym. And I think like a lot of women, it sort of started just, I had no idea what I was doing. And I'd just go in and I'd walk on the treadmill and watch what everyone else was doing, joined a few like group fitness classes, and I was like, like, I don't know if this is for me. Like, kept sort of going back to watching people doing weights, and I was like, and I think, back then, I mean, Instagram wasn't a huge thing. But I remember like jumping on YouTube and looking at like Jeff Nippard and stuff like that and being like, what does he do? And I don't think we had like, thinking back, we didn't have a lot of like strong women represented in the space. Um, and I remember on like the BBG apps, like Kayla Sinnis, when Steph Sanzo got put on that. And there was that shift from like, burpees and box jumps to strength training. And I was like, oh, now this is what I want to do. And so I started sort of dabbling in the weight side of things. Really, really enjoyed the challenge of it. And yeah, from there, sort of grew from there.
Yeah. Okay. What's something that you want women to know about strength training and about resistance training and weights? Because I think it's like you were saying, like back then it was more so you would see women more on the treadmill, things like that. And now like you see it's I would say in the gym that I go to, it's like 50-50
It's
split
so
with
good.
people. It's amazing, isn't
Yeah.
it? Like I think people are getting more educated and more they understand the importance of that stuff. What's something or some piece of advice you would give to women about, I guess, weight training?
I think one of the biggest things, it transfers to every area of your life.
Okay.
In terms of resilience, in terms of backing yourself, in terms of knowing that you can do hard things. So I think, the amount of times clients have sent me messages being like, this challenge came up in life, but like weight training has taught me I can do hard things. Just because it's hard, it doesn't mean I can't do it. And I think that sort of mental shift when you start to embrace things that are difficult, which let's be honest, like if you're pushing weights, there's days where you're like, this is not going to move, and you attempt it and it moves and you're like, hey, I can do it. So I think that shift mentally that comes along with weight training for a lot of people, I think that is huge. And I think as well, like, for so long, it's been about aesthetics. I think when we start focusing on strength, the aesthetic goals still come, and there's zero wrong with the aesthetic goals. I think for so long it's been like, you should train for aesthetics or you shouldn't train for aesthetics. Like there's no in between. Like you can get strong and still want to look jacked or look a certain way. There's nothing wrong with that. But I think focusing on health and focusing on the fact that, being strong means you're going to age well, you're going to have less health related issues coming older, you're going to be less likely to fracture bones, you're going to live a better life in terms of, risks with health through strength training. And I think that is such an important thing because, especially when we're talking, mothers and things like that, like you want to see your kids grow old. You want to be around for that. You want to be able to be present. So
Yeah. And I think like I really liked your point about like you can be strong but still like be worried about aesthetics, I guess, because like I think like that's like any sport. I think like relating it back to like myself, for example, I think like I still want to look a certain way. So I'm still focusing on the strength training and the things that I want to. But like, I think I still have to swim, I still have to run, I still have to bike for triathlon. You know what I mean? So like I think it's okay to want to look a certain way. But like I think it's interesting because like over the years we've realized as well that like weight training doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to change your aesthetics as much as we thought it would.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
I wish it would.
yeah, I know, right? Like men, if you think about like, and you look at men, like they spend years and years trying to gain like 5 pounds of muscle or like not even that. That's like a hard thing to do, 5 pounds. But like, so I think like it's super hard to change your aesthetic. So if you're like thinking that you're out there, if you're a man or a woman, thinking that, oh, I want a resistance train, but it's gonna give me the aesthetics that I don't want, I think like you'd have to be doing it for such a long time. You know what I mean? Like it's so hard to be bulky or to like look too massive or this and that, right? So I think that's a super interesting thing, really. Did you ever feel, I guess, pressure to look a certain way or any stage of your career?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
And I think, I mean, we do see those trends shift. And I think the further I've gotten into the industry, I'm like, it doesn't matter. Like, if I'm happy within my body,
Yeah.
I'll find the right people. But I remember starting out, like, within my first couple of months in the industry, I had this consult and it's just stuck in my head. And this woman comes in and she's like, "Oh my God, thank God you're not this tiny little size 6 bouncy thing." And I was like,
Okay.
thanks.
Yeah.
So, like, you will have people comment. I think you've got to have a relatively thick skin in the industry, because you will have people judge your ability to coach on how you appear. And like I said, I've been on both ends of the spectrum in terms of weight. And it hasn't changed how I've coached. In fact, having been almost 100 kilos, I think it makes me a better coach because I've been able to experience, what that's meant for how I move, how, my relationship with food, how that's had to change, the things that people have to overcome to then feel comfortable in a gym space. Like, I remember when I first started with my coach, and he was like, when we're doing posing practice, you're going to have to start wearing shorts instead of leggings. And I went home and I wanted to bawl my eyes out because I hadn't worn shorts in the gym for so many years. So it's just, I think I used to care about a lot more about, I guess, how my body image was perceived by people in the industry as well. And I think we probably cop it harder from other coaches than from people wanting to come into the gym space. And I've had people, like I said, going from, "Oh my God, thank God you're not this tiny little thing," to people being like, "You're intimidating because you're jacked." And then I get to know you and you're like this fluffy little cinnamon roll kind of thing. So it's interesting to see how, I guess, different people sort of interpret what that means for you as a coach.
Exactly. And I think like that's the reason why I asked you, because I think like sometimes coaches feel that pressure a little bit,
Yeah.
especially if you want to be in a certain or be coaching a certain demographic or
Yeah.
population. Like, I can understand. I mean, before I became a physio and exercise physiologist, I was a personal trainer as well.
Yeah.
But like, I remember being 19, getting my like PT cert, and then like, I'm a skinny guy, but like being even skinnier, right?
Yeah.
And like thinking to myself, oh, I need to look a certain way because how am I going to get clients or this and that?
Yeah.
But like, I think there's so many different areas that you can work in, but also like people's perspectives are different,
Yeah.
right? So like, I never intended to coach people who were going to be a bodybuilder. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Because I've never done that. I don't have that experience. I don't look like I'm a bodybuilder. So I can understand from that side of things, like how
Yeah, I mean, you want someone who practices what they preach to a
exactly,
degree.
exactly, right? But I think like for somebody who's just looking to be more healthy or, more inclined to go to the gym or anything, like I think those people are a little bit more accepting to, or they're not looking for a certain thing really,
Yeah.
right?
And I think as well, like, I mean, I've seen coaches who, every single time they've got lunch, it's takeaway. And they're coaching people on health and nutrition. And it's like, okay, they might look the part, but how healthy are they? So I think that's also like one to keep in mind, that like your goals and your coach's goals can be different. It doesn't mean that, just because you're going for a bodybuilding comp and they don't look like a bodybuilder, it doesn't mean they haven't previously done it. It doesn't mean that they don't have the knowledge of it. It's sort of that fine line of like, you want someone who's going to understand your experience and, practices what they preach, but also realize like they're at a different point of their journey. That's why you're reaching out to them.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I can tell you for certain as a physio, like I preach a whole lot of things that I don't practice. Like when it comes to injury and stuff like that, I'm like, oh, I'll be all right. But like if it was a client, I'd be like, nope, you're stopping really. So like, I think, coaches, like you were saying, can have different goals and things like that. And that's all right. I think like you'll find the right people, you know what I mean? And everybody's going to have an opinion at the end of the day, right? Like you can't really change people's opinions of you. So like, why bother?
Exactly.
I think is my
You'll find
opinion.
your people.
Exactly. How's your coaching style evolved over the years?
I think it's I'd like to say it's gotten better.
Okay.
I think if you don't look back at what you used to do and cringe a little bit, have
Mhm.
you really grown?
Yeah, exactly.
Like I remember coming into the industry, and I don't know if it was the same when you did your PT set, but it was very like, give them an experience that they're going to remember where they've pushed so hard that they're like, I can't push this hard on my own, sort of thing.
Yeah.
And like, I feel like I initially came into it having that in the back of my mind, and then realizing that that's actually what scares a lot of people out of continuing on. And so, I think the overall focus on health has been a huge one, and shifting it away from like, not every session has to be absolutely kicking your ass. Yes, there's sessions where you should absolutely push. And I like those sessions where my clients are like a little bit like, oh, I didn't think I was capable of doing that. And they surprise themselves, because I think that in itself is very beneficial, and sort of taking away those limitations for clients. But at the same time, if they're coming in and their first experience with a coach is them walking out of there being like, I wanted to vomit, like that's not a good thing. Some people might enjoy it, but for a lot of people, especially women coming into a space where they don't feel comfortable, making them more uncomfortable isn't going to may have them wanting to come back. So I think that has definitely evolved in the way that I coach. And I think, again, going into it initially with that like all or nothing, the shit that we always get, we all have the same 24 hours in the day. And I remember I was in a long-term relationship a while ago with someone who had a kid from their past relationship. And I was like, I'm working full time. I'm trying to, like, in a 9 to 5 corporate job, trying to build my business. I'm also now a stepmom, managing a relationship. That is not the same as someone who is part-time uni, living at home, no kids. Like, yes, there's 24 hours in a day, but our, experience of those 24 hours is so different. So I think that has also changed a lot. And I think I've gotten a lot more compassionate in terms of like, like, let's work with what we've got. If you can only do 2 sessions a week, let's make that work, rather than telling someone that's not good enough. Give them like a realistic expectation of, okay, if you're training 2 days a week instead of 4, it might take you longer to reach that goal, but that's okay.
Yeah.
We've got time.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it just goes to that comparison side of things, right? Like you were saying, like nobody really has the same 24 hours,
No.
right? Like me, for example, like training for a half Ironman, doing, this business and the podcast. I'm a physio on top of it.
Yeah.
Like I am loaded, and I have a lot of like loaded with like time, and I have so much going on, at once. But I could totally understand like someone, like you were saying, who has maybe a child, who has a full-time job and all of that. I can totally understand, doesn't have the same 24 hours that I do. Like I'm in a very fortunate position right now in my life that I can do all of those kind of stuff. And I think like that's probably an important thing for not only the coach to understand, but like somebody going into a session to understand, right?
Yeah.
Like I think too, it was always when I was going through my PT, like it was always, oh, try and sign somebody for 5 days a week or like more and more. And I understand from like the financial side of things, yes, but like when it comes to the time side of things, like if someone has, a family at home and like all of these responsibilities, like coming to the gym twice a week is plenty to start with. You know what I mean? If in the future you can afford to add another 30-minute session, like a third day, then by all means. But like I think like thinking of it that way is super important as well.
And I think even in terms of making things sustainable and making it part of a lifestyle, like going from 0 to 100, and this is where, again, the 12-week challenges and stuff tend to fall off. You're better off, if you look at the neuroscience of behavior change, trying to overhaul your whole life at once doesn't stick. The body, like the nervous system, will freak out because it's something different, and it will do everything that it can to restore normalcy. So, we're setting people up to fail by going, okay, let's completely overhaul your diet. We're going to change your sleep schedule. We're going to train 6 days a week, this. If we start with 2 sessions a week, the amount of times that clients then go, oh, I'm hitting this consistently and I'm feeling really good. Like I'll make time for a 3rd session. And, they'll be like 4 8 weeks in, and they'll be wanting to add another session, or they'll be like, can I add some cardio in? Can I do this? And it comes from them wanting to, and then it sticks. So it's, you're setting them up for success by potentially taking a slightly slower start and having them prove to themselves that they can consistently do that. And it's building trust in themselves as well to meet what they say they'll do.
Yeah, and I think you hit something key there. Like somebody has to want to do something for you to get them to,
Yeah.
right? Like if you're telling them, "Oh, you need to add a third session, this," they might be shaking their head and everything and booking the appointment, but like chances are they're going to cancel
Yeah.
or like they're only going to come to an extra session once or something like that, right? Like if you set it up so that they want to or help set it up so that
Yeah.
they want to, then I think that like is better for you as a coach in your business, but also like for the individual because they're wanting and they are seeing that difference
Yeah.
really.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um now what are some common, we have already alluded to some of these things in the past, but what are some of the most common misconceptions you think that women have when they first come to see you or just in the fitness space general?
I mean, I think the one that always gets touched on is like lifting weights makes you bulky. Um, I think we're starting to see a shift away from that. And I mean, I hate saying that like as different body types are trending, but we see that. And we have had initially that shift towards, the muscle mummies, and people wanting to build muscle. Um, but it's funny because we have people who are like, I don't want to get bulky. But then we also have people look at these transformations that are like insane. And they're like, I can achieve that in 6 months. And you're like, no, your muscle takes longer. Like it's that real like opposite. Um, so I think that's one. I think one that a lot of people, there's this image of like, your gym bro or people in the gym that are, they're self-absorbed, they're lacking in brain cells. Like you just get that real like him bro kind of like um very judgy, very elitist kind of thing. And like, okay, again, every space has people like that. But I think people, yeah, have a lot of misconceptions about the fitness space in that sort of side
Mm,
of things.
mm.
Um,
I agree with that one as well. I think we alluded to the whole intimidating thing
yeah,
in the past, right? Like the gym that I go to just around the corner, like I think it is classically where a lot of people who compete go to. Like you have a lot of big guys there,
yeah,
even women and everything. And I think like to somebody who is first maybe coming to the gym, it can be quite
yeah,
intimidating. And you might think, oh, I can't do this, right? Like people are
yeah,
judging me and this and that. It's like I think at the end of the day, like what you said in the past, like people that are doing better than you or who have reached, something that you're wanting to are not
they'll be
going
your
to be
biggest cheerleaders.
exactly, they're not judging you. And like at the same time, I think as humans in this day and age, we think that everybody is paying attention to us and like life
Yeah,
revolves around us, but like I would say like 90% of people in the gym aren't even paying attention to you. Like
yeah.
even if their eyes brushed you like for 5 seconds, like they were probably just like looking around. You
Yeah,
know what I
or on
mean?
the flip side, like, and I was joke with one of my friends because we'll train together, and like I'm constantly like to him, I'm like, oh my god, like look how buff this chick is. Look at the glutes on this chick. Look at the delts on this chick. Like she's jacked. Like I think a lot of the time people are so like self-conscious, and half the time people are looking at them in admiration. And I've actually gone up to chicks before, like in the gym, and been like, you know, you're squatting some serious weight. Like that's impressive and things like that. And they were just like, oh, thank you so much. Like just yeah, I think people automatically assume the worst. And I remember like first time I ever stepped foot in right away, I was like, oh my god, I don't belong here. Everyone here's so like good looking and jacked, and
Yeah.
and now I love it. Like everyone's so friendly, and
Mm, mm.
I need to schedule an extra half hour of yap time
Yeah,
every
yeah,
time I'm
yeah,
there.
yeah. And that's the gym that I was
Yeah,
talking to. That's where I go. And I was like, I mean, I've gone to the gym for years, and even though again I don't do the whole bodybuilding space, I can understand how people could find it
oh yeah,
intimidating, right? Like
100%.
I personally don't, but I can. And I think like what you alluded to as well, like a lot of people too could be admiring you and like, are just not saying anything or anything
Yeah,
like that. Like if you go into a situation like that, with optimism
Yeah.
or like looking at it with a different perspective. Like I always laugh when I'm going through Instagram or TikTok, and you see the videos of people like, they have the camera and then they post like, oh, so and so's looking at me, blah, 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 blah. I'm like,
Yeah.
well, okay, but
You're standing
like
in the middle of a gym with a camera
with
set
a
up.
camera, yeah, and like maybe they're admiring what you're doing or something like
Yeah.
that, right? Like you're taking your misconceptions and your
Yeah.
like I guess ignorance in a
Yeah,
way
I
and
mean, I
putting
look,
on
yeah,
others.
I look back at when I first joined a gym and I had no idea what I was doing, and I learned by watching how other people were
Yeah,
using the machines and things like
exactly.
that.
Yeah.
Um, so I think, yeah, applying that lens of like maybe people are new there and they're not sure what they're doing,
Yeah.
and they're looking for a bit of guidance because they're too scared to ask. Maybe they're admiring you. There's so many different. Maybe they're just like literally just lifted heavy and they're zoning out, staring into
Exactly.
space.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think like again, I think like from the let them theory, which I just finished,
Yeah.
like one thing that I got from that, I got many things, but like one thing is like a lot of the times, like I was saying before, we think that people are paying attention to you, and like a lot of the time people just don't care.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And
Like,
even if they are watching you and judging you,
mm,
then what?
yeah, exactly.
Like you're gonna walk out of there and probably never see them again.
Yeah, exactly. Or you only see them for an hour a day, like
Yeah.
whatever, right? What is a piece of advice you would give to your younger self? I guess like prior to starting all of this.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Yeah.
I think just don't overthink things. Just send it. If
Mm,
you want to do something, try it. Like there's nothing like I think people fail worse by not doing something. You might try something and decide it's not for you. You might try something and be like, you know, that was a horrible experience, but then I think if it's worse to live questioning what if. Um, I think some of the best experiences in my life have just been from, going screw it, let's send it
mm,
and just doing it.
yeah.
Do the thing.
Yeah. And I think that's something that Mel Robbins alluded to as well
Yeah.
recently in her podcast. Like she was like something along the lines of a lot of the times the thing that's holding us back is ourselves.
Yeah,
Like,
100%.
like the fear of failure and us like not wanting to achieve something. Like you just have to do it, right?
Yeah.
Like
I
if
mean,
you
if you
fail,
let
you
it,
fail,
yeah, and if
right?
you let it hold you back,
Yeah.
you haven't achieved the thing anyway.
Hmm.
You haven't even like attempted to,
Yeah.
so you lose out.
Yeah. And that's probably like you were saying worse than even like trying and failing, right? Because
Yeah.
at least you tried and you know that it didn't work. Or like sometimes that can light a fire in people,
Yeah.
like try again after that
Yeah,
or
and
try for something bigger.
yeah, and I'm very much a big believer of like failing better. So like, okay, you didn't do it this time. If you stop, then you're never going to achieve it. If you keep going, what if the next time is the time that you get it? What time if like, the time after that, what if that's when it clicks? Each time you reattempt something, you're coming at it with more experience. You're coming at it with what doesn't work. So eventually, eventually something's got to click.
Yeah, exactly.
So if you want it that badly, you're not losing out by not getting it straight away, as long as you keep on sending it.
Definitely agree with that. What do you want your legacy to be in the health and fitness space?
Ooh. I just want women to feel comfortable in a gym space, taking up space, and not having to shrink themselves. Not necessarily like again, it's not just in an aesthetics sense, in feeling comfortable there, in knowing that they have a space there. I think that's a big one.
Yeah. No, that's very fair, I think, with that one. How do you personally define health today and what's changed over the years?
Ooh, I think now it would be very much that like mind, body, spirit triad. I think, you can on paper be the healthiest person in the world in terms of training, nutrition, all of that. If your mental health is in the bin, you're not healthy. You can have the best mental health, but physically, if you're not healthy, if, whether you want to call it spirit, soul, connection, whatever, if there's no connections in your life that light you up, if you're not doing the things that, light you up inside, is that really health? So I think it's that holistic sort of approach. Whereas when I first started out, it was like, no, lift weights and diet. Now it sort of, encapsulates a lot more of, I guess, the mental side.
Yeah.
And
I think that's a very important thing in a lot of things, right? Like as a physio, I ask about stress all of the
yeah,
time and like
it's a
I can
huge
totally
one.
exactly and I can totally tell from like a client perspective. They're like, I have a knee injury. Why are you talking about like, what I've been up to this week or something like,
Yeah.
but like you were saying, it does have such an effect on how you perform, how
Oh,
you
yeah.
recover, your likelihood of getting injured or,
Yeah.
all of these things. It's something that my triathlon coach, my running coach, they ask every week
Yeah.
in my survey is how stressed were you this week?
Yeah.
And I think like realizing that like if you've had a bad week in the gym or you've had something go wrong, let's say you've gotten an injury or something, like realizing, okay, well, what mentally has been going on
Yeah.
this week, right? And I think a lot of us are starting to realize that.
Yeah.
And like what I love seeing is people taking more personal time, people taking more days for like their mental health and
Yeah.
doing things like that. But like I think a lot of the times us in the fitness space are very focused on the performance side of
Yeah.
things, on actually training, but don't actually spend time for the mind,
Yeah.
really.
100%.
hmm Um, if a woman is listening right now and feeling stuck, what is one thing that you want her to know?
Baby steps. Little steps will still move you forward. I think everyone has a point where they feel like they're, trudging through mud mixed with quicksand. Baby steps still move you forward. I constantly talk to my clients about control the controllables. There's going to be times when you do feel stuck. You feel like you can't get all your sessions in. You can't control the food side of things, whatever it is. There are always going to be certain little factors that you can control, even if it is literally how much sleep you're getting. So if you're feeling stuck, no, you will get through it. I think, obviously reach out to people around you, but know that every little step is still a step forward. You can slow down, you can take time and space to breathe when you need to, but a small step still counts.
Amazing. And finally, what are your goals right now?
Get jacked.
Okay. Simple.
Yeah, we are going into it. We're still reversing out post
Yeah.
comps.
Okay.
And then we are going into a build phase.
Okay.
So yeah, looking to push some serious weight,
Yeah.
put on some more density.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's the main one. It's just,
Amazing.
yeah.
Yeah. Where can people find you, Kat?
Probably Instagram is the best one.
Okay.
So I am coached by _cat with a K.
Okay.
Yeah, that's
Perfect. And
easiest
that will
one to
be in the
find.
show notes so everybody
Beautiful.
can find you there. But thank you for coming on out. I think like a lot of women and men even hopefully can get a lot from the chat today because
Yeah.
like I think it's important again having somebody like you who's been on the space or in the space for years on end, right? Because like I think that perspective is a bit different than a newer coach
Yeah.
or not. So thank you for coming
Thank you
on.
for having me.
That's all right. Alrighty, everybody. Thank you for listening to today's episode. Please hit that 5-star review button. It really helps out the show. I will talk to you all in the next episode.